Everyone, thank you for inviting me. So nice to speak to everybody. So I'm Clare Evans, Head of ACCA and FIA Programmes at BPP. I've been there 15 years now. I started as a tutor teaching face-to-face, and then I moved across to teaching online classes when the internet allowed that to happen. And I've been head of programme for the last 4 years now, and that is such a varied role. It involves me organising the tutors so we've got the right content to cover, liaising with ACCA to make sure that we've got the right syllabus covered and we've got all the changes that are coming up, such as the CBE support. And I also get to speak to a lot of students as well to find out where they are in their journey and what the challenges are. And I am actually ACCA qualified myself. So I was a student at BPP before I became a tutor, and then obviously head of programme more recently. But I deal with a lot of stakeholders, so it's a very interesting role.
And indeed, and I can imagine you are very proud that you head up a program that delivers such remarkable pass rates.
Yes, the pass rates are fantastic, and I say they are across every paper. We don't have the odd one that drops down. They are consistent across there. And again, I deal with a lot to do with the pass rate analysis and the clients. And obviously, if there are any issues with any papers, it's me that gets the task force situated to sort any issues out and liaise with the people as well. So very proud of our pass rates and our platinum status, and working with ACCA as well to make sure we get the best journey for students.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much for that. And then, Kada, a lot of students I see are greeting you in the chat, and you're a familiar face. Kada is from ACCA South Africa. And do you want to tell us a little bit about your role before you kick off the proceedings tonight?
Okay, my name is Kada Piri. I think most of the students know me. I've also got a background in lecturing. So I was also lecturing ACCA before I joined to work for ACCA South Africa. I also studied at BVP as well, but sometime back in London. And people like Tom Clenton were my lecturers in London. Yeah, so I've got a bit of background in where Clare is coming from. But my role in South Africa, I'm a business development manager. My role is firstly to recruit students, work with learning providers like IBTC, and make sure that we're recruiting students to the ACCA qualification. My second thing that I do is I liaise with the employers as well, because some employers want to put students on the ACCA qualification. I also liaise with the employers on and also take them through what we call an approved employer program, and also the PER itself, on how they design the PER in their organizations. And then my third role is I also deal with the ACCA members, and I also support them in terms of the regulatory space, how to help them, what they can do, what they can't do, and how they can navigate their journey as members as well. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Kada. That's great. What part of what we wanted to achieve tonight is to remind ACCA students that they are studying a global qualification, and that they are supported locally. So the two of you are on the left of my screen. Clare is at the top and Kada is at the bottom, and the two of you really represent the the students are on a global qualification yet supported locally. So it's quite nice to have you here tonight. Thank you very much. For the one representing the global qualification, the other one representing really the tuition support. Kada, I thought it would be nice to kick off with some interesting facts about ACCA. Would you like to briefly give us some history about ACCA?
Okay, thanks, Nikki. Sure, where do I start? There's a lot of things to say. First of all, I think ACCA has a rich history. It was formed in 1904 by 9 accountants, and one of them was a lady. So that's very significant as well, because we're one of the first professional bodies to admit a woman into the profession, because at that time women could not vote. So that was how significant that was. But then when it was formed in London, one of the key things that it was formed for was to bring in inclusiveness and diversity into the profession. So guess where the first place where ACCA set up its office? South Africa, okay? because of the trade routes to India, because ships used to travel from Europe and stop in Cape Town before they went to India to trade. So ACCA came in 1913 in South Africa, officially launching their first office outside the UK. And then we grew our membership, and we've been growing steadily. In the years that followed, we reached 100,000, which is a milestone for a professional body. Most professional bodies, when they talk about membership, they talk about membership because they've got partners with other membership. But ACCA talks about people who graduated and done the qualification itself. Okay, so that was the first, and we reached it in 2004. And we've been able to double those numbers by now, 2021, which has been a milestone. You see, it took us 90 years to get to 100,000, but it's taken us less than 25 years to get to 200,000. So that's how huge we are. And then we also were the first professional body to design a qualification based on the International Financial Reporting Standards. Okay, so this was in 1996. Okay, so we were the first body to embrace international reporting standards because we looked at ourselves as a global body and we thought, if we're a global body, why don't we use international standards? Although everybody adapts them to the country, but they form the basis of what all accountants do. Okay, and today we stand at 256,000 members globally, and we have a student base of 605,000 members, which is huge. And we have offices and satellite offices in 191 countries globally. So that's a huge network. And then we've got BPP and IBTC, our partners that we work with. So ACCA doesn't do everything, but it says, okay, BPP, you're good at something. So we give you what you're good at. So they publish our books, they do our syllabus, they do the teaching. The same with IBTC. You can't be good at everything. So ACCA is very good at designing the qualification and awarding the qualification and examining. So one of the big things that we've been working in the past 3 years is called partnerships. So our theme has been partnerships, working with others to achieve the same objective. Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you, Kada. There's a lot in there that I want to unpack, but we have to keep that for another session. But I love the idea of partnerships because what do they say? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together or go with someone. And that whole how we all fit together
Yes.
Comes out in what you've said. What
Yeah.
I also liked what you said was that ACCA was started by 9 people. And I always say, never underestimate what a small group of people can do.
Can't do, yeah.
And then the last thing you said was 191 countries. And you know, sometimes it's just a stat, but if you sit and think about it, you think, wow, I will be welcomed with my qualification in 191 countries. How many countries have you been to? It's a rhetorical question because maybe you have been to 100, but maybe not. We don't often get to go to maybe more than 5 or 6 or 7 or 2 countries. So you would be welcome and recognized with your ACCA in 191 countries. That's just a mind-blowing thought, really. So I think at this point I am going to hand over to Claire, who is going to tell us more about I always say the SMART title is the value of ACCA globally, and the title that I wanted to give it was Why Study ACCA? And Claire is going to tell us all about that.
Thank you. So can I just check I'm sharing my screen okay? As it all comes through?
Yes.
Perfect. It's always good when the technology works. So that was a great introduction about ACCA, and I've learned something. I thought we were up to 170 countries. So I've learned it's 191 now. I know I'm so proud to be ACCA recognised in my qualification, and obviously I'm so thrilled that it's the ACCA qualification that I'm head of. So it's nicely aligned. We have so many students that we train from all around the world, and it's so humbling when I start teaching and they tell me things from different locations, and it's so different, the law in different places, the tax in different places, but it is just amazing how we're all brought together under the one umbrella by ACCA. So it is very much evolving, and I loved it that we had 9 people starting ACCA. We only had 3 at BPP. One of them had a name beginning with B, one beginning with P, and the third one with P, which is where BPP came from. So let me move along with my slides. So this is looking at why would you want to do ACCA? I guess some of you have already started on the journey, so it's not for discussion, you've committed to it. But it's nice to have a recap as you're going through. Maybe you've failed an exam, maybe COVID has affected how you can progress compared to how you wanted to progress. So it's a nice opportunity to recap, why am I doing this? And it is worthwhile. So I want to go through why it's been recognised globally, why it's a good qualification, and then just to go through the ACCA qualification aspects, which make you very employable. And I was always talking to other clients about different qualifications, and I always feel it's a sales pitch. Why should they come and do my course rather than somebody else's, different institutes? And it's always an easy sell. But when I've done the presentations, I always think, yes, there's a lot to it. It's not just exams. So I want to go through the qualification, explain the levels, and then just show you how flexible it can be. So I think in current times, it's nice just to have a recap every so often. So BPP have been around for 44 years. They were started by the three people, Mr. B, Mr. P, and Mr. P. We are world leading. We are recognised for doing a lot of accountancy training, a lot of law training as well. We train a lot of lawyers, and we also do some other qualifications in health, veterinary, IT, data, because obviously data and technology is the big buzzword at the moment. So we have predominantly been teaching accountancy and law, but we do have a lot of disciplines as well. And we use what we've learned from accountancy and law, which is where we started, to roll out the success that we've had. We do teach to a lot of the big firms, so the Deloittes, the PwCs. We also teach to individuals, and that's one of the big selling points to me about ACCA. You don't have to be employed. You don't have to be tied to a big firm. You could go this alone if you wanted to. Obviously, it'll be harder, or you could go this with an employer, and that isn't always available for some qualifications. So it's got such flexibility in terms of how you even access the qualification, let alone the components of it. It is in 170 countries. I need to update that to 191 countries. It is growing. Obviously, that shows it is a growing number of countries, and it is the most recognised qualification. So if you do want to travel, it's certainly a good thing to have behind you. We have a lot of trainees, and we've taught a lot of trainees over the years. I'll say I was a BPP student, and then I just started teaching when I was qualified. We do work closely with ACCA. It's one of the best parts of my job. I love my visits to the ACCA office in London, and we work with them to make sure we are producing the correct kits, workbooks, study texts. I'm sure most of you have seen our qualifications that we do. I'm sure most of you have seen the books, the question kits that are full of past exam questions, and these get approved by ACCA on an annual basis, and that's something I get very closely involved with. So I have a team of authors, we have specialist faculties, so we have some financial reporting teams, some tax teams. They work closely together to create the materials. These are then sent to ACCA for them to review, to check that they're happy with the quality, that they're happy that we've covered everything in the syllabus, that we've interpreted everything as they want. And this has been an ongoing journey for us for many, many years. We work closely with them about changes to exam format. So we've seen a lot of change. I was at a meeting with the ACCA earlier this week, and they talked about the exam journey from 2014. And 2014 was when they first brought in the CBE exams, and it doesn't feel like it was 7 years ago when that journey was started. And I know some countries are still coming online, and that's not completed until later in 2021 for the strategic papers. So if you are able to join my session, I think it's 13th of May, I'm doing a session specifically about CBE support, the things that I would like you to know, the things I wish I'd known maybe 5 years ago when I started introducing this and training the tutors. So it is a very much collaborative exercise that we have for the creation of our content, our mock exams, and the books that you see as well. We are also approved training providers. So we do a lot of support for colleges like IBTC and all around the world, and we help train some of their tutors, we help share some of our content with them, and again we support them with webinars such as this. And if there is some changes that are coming up, like the CBE exams that were introduced, we make sure we're all supportive together, so it's like one big ACCA family, so we're all supporting. I do get inspected on an annual basis. That's the part of the job I don't like. We get inspected to check that our teaching is up to scratch, that the way we structure our classes is up to scratch, the way we support and mark scripts for the students. There's an absolute growing list of things that ACCA like to check and inspect. So obviously BPP is a very credible source for your tuition, and obviously ACCA is a very credible source to have as your qualification. But as a lot goes on behind the scenes, I didn't realize how much until I became the head of program. And when I've had one of my inspections, I appreciate it, because I think I've got my stamp of approval, but it is hard work to make sure we keep the standards that are required. But I'm glad we do, because I'm very proud of the Institute. Our pass rates, Nikki mentioned earlier, the pass rates, they are very good, and they are very good across all of the papers. I'm not sure if you've ever looked at the ACCA global pass rates. The option papers are always very low. You can see with the dark purple lines on screen, the option papers, the global pass rates can be anything from 30 to 40%. And I always think that's so disappointing, because that means people that studied, paid to enter that exam, 60% of those didn't get through that exam. And I've spoken to students, and I know that that for some might have been the second or third time they've failed that paper. So I always make sure I focus when I'm teaching on the marginal students. We will always have the student that's going to be very good or a prize winner. I do have some prize winners. So on the next slide, there's the BPP prize winners from September. But I think we make the most difference for the student that would be getting 47, 48 or 49. And that's where I'm hoping in the rest of this, this webinar, I can show you some pointers, some things that you need to do to hopefully make yourself more employable, which is what we're all here for, to make sure you make the journey from starting ACCA to finishing as painless as possible, as smooth as possible as well. And that's where I take my pride in my job. And I like to do all the things we can to get that marginal student over the line. And that's where we make the difference. I know some people in this session will have failed a paper, and we all know how destroying that is when you get that mark. So if we can focus on making sure everybody just gets those final 3 or 4%, then that makes such a huge difference. And as you can see, that's where we are focusing on all of our materials that we produce, in all of the extra checkpoints and skills checkpoints and webinars and resources that we produce. And you can see there with the lighter purple line that we're doing something that's getting those students over the line compared to the average student. We do have lots of numbers, and our marketing team like numbers. We have, by being a BPP student, you are 20% more likely to pass. So just by being one of our students, 20% more likely to pass than a global student. If you follow our momentum program, which is things like the achievement ladder steps and mini assessments, you are 35% more likely to pass. So if you do your homework, you're more likely to pass. There's no surprises there. So we really do hone in on those marginal students as well to make sure we make that difference to each an individual person. Benefits of ACCA. This was more me reflecting on, why did I do ACCA? I didn't want to be an accountant. It was never what I intended to happen. I went to university and I did a psychology degree, nothing to do with accountancy whatsoever. I then got to the end of my degree and I thought, well, what do I do with that? And the jobs that were available were accountancy. I thought, well, that's looking okay. Some more learning. I quite like exams, which is maybe a bad thing. So there's more exams to keep me occupied. And then I looked and thought, well, you don't hear of accountants being unemployed, and you don't hear of accountants struggling. So I thought, well, I like nice things, so that sounds all right, we'll give that a go. And there wasn't much more that I could do with my degree, so I decided to embark on my training contract as an accountant. And why did I do it? Career development. It never stops. So you do your qualification, which it can take, on a good day, 3 years. And I know for some people it can take 7, 8, 9 years. Things happen, and obviously it takes longer. And that's the people that I want to talk to today. It's just, it's worth it in the longer run. You have a career. You can use this full-time, part-time. You can change as you're going through. You can decide to work in a big accountancy firm. You can decide to work in industry. You can decide to work for the councils, the government bodies. I'm sure they've got different names over in South Africa, but the flexibility of it, you can even teach. So I always wanted to teach. That was something I always wanted to do. And it just happened that accountancy and teaching has gone together. And I say I do have a nice time doing both of those roles. Salary potential, I do have nice things. And obviously, you know, you work hard and this is what we get at the end of it. And then exemptions. So if you have been lucky enough to choose a qualification, a degree that's relevant, unlike I did, that means that you maybe don't have to do as many papers. So it might be a quicker route for you. So it certainly opens so many doors. You can work full-time, part-time, you can work globally, those 191 countries. You can choose so many different industries. You don't even have to work in accountancy. I know some people that have used their accountancy qualification to get into management, to get into consultancy. So it is an absolute baseline to make sure that you can then do other types of career that maybe interest you. I say some people, I love spreadsheets. That was maybe why I liked accountancy, but spreadsheets and colour on spreadsheets, I could do that all day long. I'm probably in good company. I'm probably safe to say that in this room, but certainly there's so much you can do. Why ACCA? Obviously, I did look at other qualifications. When I was my 21-year-old self, I hadn't heard of the institutes. I didn't know which to choose across. And, you know, I chose a good one quite accidentally at that point. I wasn't informed. It's a globally recognised qualification. What I love is the variant papers. So you can do your local variant tax. There's a local variant law paper. I always just open that page on the ACCA website every so often, and it just reminds me how big the qualification has grown. And sometimes I don't like to look because I think there's all these different papers we might have to do, but it's so flexible. As Carter said in the introduction, you know, you've got these international standards, that's opened doors. You've got your international tax variants for quite a few, not all, but quite a few and a growing number of countries. And you've got your law papers as well. And I know, and I was quite reassured when I opened a variant law paper, they are largely based on the English law. So it is very much based on the Companies Act and English contract law, but there are slight twists, and that is accommodated. There are not many global qualifications out there, and there are not many qualifications that have that flexibility to reflect the needs of those different locations. It's a profession. I have friends that ask me to sign their passport applications, and I don't know why. I felt so proud the first time somebody said to me, Claire, can you sign my passport application? And I was thrilled. I thought, somebody thinks I am professional and reliable enough to sign that. And that's because I'm an ACCA accountant. I was on the list, and it is something that people respect. And you do get asked to do all sorts of things. I'll say, to me, that was the absolute shock. I was like, I'm up there with medics, doctors, lawyers. I was on that list. And it just made me so proud that I thought I'm recognised. And then you've obviously got the other elements to the qualifications. So you've got, it's not just about exams. And that's where I want to go on the next slide. So before I do that, has anybody got any questions so far? Just aware I'm doing a lot of talking.
I can't see any questions coming through at the moment. I am enjoying it very much.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Every word, and that might be the reason for it. But guys, you can feel free to pop the question into the chat. But otherwise, I'm captivated.
Thank you. I'd say it's more of a therapy session for myself over how I got to where I am. But I think it's interesting, and it's a nice time to reflect in the current situation of you maybe been studying a few years. Is it worth continuing? I have a lot of discussions with students like that. So I've just moved along my slides, and you can see the types of organisations that might want to employ us. These have all got ACCA students in there. So you've got your typical big firms, PwC, KPMG, and you've got some banks in there as well. And people like Nestle, which is obviously a UK chocolate company, they all have people who are accountants, and they will have worldwide pharmaceutical companies. Obviously AstraZeneca is topical at the moment. They'll have accountants in there. They will have ACCA accountants in there. And it's a chance to specialise into an industry you've got an interest in, as well as obviously ACCA qualification and everything that's required to get yourself fully qualified. This is the map of where we have students. Absolutely every location apart from Greenland at the moment. And that's where ACCA is recognised. So we have such a breadth of students. When I'm teaching papers online, obviously online attracts all the international students. I absolutely love finding out where the students are from. I feel like I've had a virtual outing. I'm like, where am I today? And on our online classes, they're like, I'm in Russia, I'm over in Malaysia. And it's just fabulous to find out where these people are from. And when we do our longer classes, they bring such a breadth of experience. And well, in my country, it's like this, and in my country, it's like that. And it just helps everyone realize how similar, like with the company law, but then different as to how we treat accountancy and to staff as well. So you've got your human resources and the way you have different rights as an employee. So fascinating to find out all the varied people that are under that ACCA umbrella. I've got the ACCA qualification, and I show this to lots of students to remind them it's not just exams, it's also the ethics module, and it's also the experience that you've got to get. So your 3-year experience log. They don't want just people that can decide if it's A, B, C, D. They want people that have got worldly experience, because we need you to be employable. We need it to be a relevant qualification to what we have to do these days, and it's changed in the 20 years since I qualified. And we need to have experience logged to prove we are credible again. The ethics module, which you're eligible to sit once you are doing your strategic professional papers or your applied skills, is absolutely amazing. I've been in there and I've played on it, and I really encourage you to do this, not at the end of 3 years, but as you're progressing. It's got so many things in there. It's so interactive. ACCA have invested so much time to bring this up to the speed and experience we expect of a qualification. And I don't know whether you're aware, but from the 1st of April this year, they've brought in a new element to the ethics module, and that's where you have to do a mini presentation and then peer review some of the other ones that your colleagues and peers have done as well. And to me, that's making you so employable and ready to go in the workplace, because you will have to do presentations. And so now that is the first time, and it's the first qualification that's brought that in. So please don't be sat there going, oh, I've got to do a presentation, I really don't like that. Embrace it. It's what you have to do in your day jobs, and it's a chance to do a short presentation, receive criticism, critique from other people, and to also then see what other people are doing as well worldwide. So that's new from the 1st of April. It should take you about 2 hours from presenting yourself to feeding back, not all in one go, but it's about 2 hours additional onto that ethics module. But it just shows that ACCA are moving with the time and why this is a good qualification. My favourite slide. This is a slide that just summarises the whole of the qualification. You've got your applied knowledge level at the bottom, then your applied skills, which are the combination of objective tests and those typed CRQ responses. And then you've got your strategic professional, which are the bigger master's level papers, which are just nearly moved across to CBE. You've also got your ethics module in the teal colour, and then in the dark brown across the top, you've got your 3-year experience. And it covers everything. It's got exams, it's got variant exams for each of the countries. It covers audit and tax, which a few qualifications get criticism because they don't. So we've got that ticked off. We have a mixture of objective knowledge questions. And then we also at the higher level have those exams where you've got to apply and write questions and write emails and responses and memos. It's such a broad qualification. And that's why I think it is attractive to people who want to employ you, because at the very bottom, you have done, how do I do a job description? How do I recruit somebody? In the middle level, you've got the basics of every part of accountancy you would need. And then at the higher level, you've got an option to then decide, where do I want to go in the future? And then you can decide which of those options you're going to do. So very, very good, very well covered. Nothing seems to be missing. Always evolving, as we've seen with that ethics module. They've not stood still. They're still evolving as they go through. What I've done now is I've put about 4 slides together with Clare's golden rules. So students always ask me, what paper should I do next? Which of the option papers should I do? And that's more why I've brought this to this webinar. So I brought the full set because it seems incomplete if I don't bring all of them, but I really want to focus on the option papers, because that makes you again more employable, and it gives you the option to be more relevant to where you work now or where you want to be. So if you take nothing away from this webinar, I'd like you to take the one gem of, how am I going to choose the option papers? Am I just going to do the ones my friends are doing, or the ones that most people do? Or am I going to choose to make sure I get the smoothest passage through them so I pass more successfully? And then the ones that I can put on my CV and show an employer, I really want to be an auditor and I've done the audit paper. So I will show you the full set for completeness, but really why ACCA, it's the fact that you can specialize, and then making sure I've just planted that seed. That's my one takeaway, is I've given you that idea of, where do I decide I want to do my options? Which papers are best for me? So you've got at the bottom the knowledge level papers. I've been very naughty here because I've put the law paper on this slide as well. For most of the variants, but not all of them, the law paper is an on-demand exam. So you sit it and it's all auto-marked and you get the response straight away. For some variants, it isn't an on-demand exam. It is one which you have to sit in March, June, September, December. So to me, law is a bit of a strange paper, because for some people it belongs on this slide, and for some it belongs on the next slide if it's one that's sat on sitting. So you've got here the ones that are 2 hours long. They are good base papers. They are just testing your knowledge. They're a nice introduction to accountancy. So they assume that you've not ever done accountancy, you don't know double entry bookkeeping, you don't know management accounting. I would be, if pushed, saying that the business technology paper, the FBT or AB as it used to be called paper, is the nice and easiest one to lead into your qualification. I would then say the trickier ones are your FFA or FA paper, which is your first sight of seeing double entry bookkeeping. And now, as we're thinking about the qualification, I think we forget about the skills we've picked up. I think we get quite complacent. You know, you've got halfway through your journey and you think, I've got all these papers left to go, and you forget how much you've done. Not many people in the population know how to do double entry bookkeeping. I mean, it's probably not a skill that everybody in the population wants, but that was hard work. Getting just to understand double entry bookkeeping was hard work. And that is then the basis for your FR paper and your SBR paper. So they are the foundations. You've then got your applied skills level. These are the ones that have been on the CBE software for a while. The CBE software at Applied Skills is quite similar to the strategic paper ones, but the strategic paper software is slightly different, just to keep us on our toes and to make sure we're more employable, because we can manipulate screens differently. So these are ones that are sat and are 3 hours in duration. Part of them are auto-marked, part of them are human marked. And I have been at a marker for ACCA, and when I've done my marking, you get students that have clearly practiced on the software and students that haven't practiced on the software. And you can tell them from those that have just gone in, not had to think about how they lay it out, and those that have gone in and are fumbling around trying to find out how to use that software. So a mixture of how you approach them. The sooner you can learn your CBE exam practice, the better you're going to be as you progress through to your strategic paper, because the skills are transferable. If you were to do 2 papers, you've got PM and TX go together nicely, FRAA go together nicely. I really just like it that students are progressing. ACCA have problems with students that start and then stop and then restart again. Set yourself a realistic target, and that's going to be your roadmap to get through. So thinking about, how am I going to do a year? Am I going to do 3 a year, 4 a year, 2 a sitting? Is one of the sittings harder for me because it's maybe a busy time at work or for the family? So thinking and setting your stall out as to what your order and strategy is going to be. Now, this is where I wanted to spend the time thinking about your career options. You've got SBL and SBR, which are the essentials. SBL being that big case study. If you sit the ethics module just before your SBL exam, you are 25% more likely to pass it. And that's just so powerful as a statistic. You've got to do it at some point. So why not sit it at the time that makes your passage through the qualification smooth and more successful? So just thinking about setting up, I'm going to do these over the next 2 years, slot in your ethics module. And so the ethics module has been rejigged. Is amazing with that webinar you've got to present. You've then got SBR, which is a feeder paper to AAA, because you need to be able to do the group accounts, do the accounting in order to audit it. So SBR should ideally be sat before AAA. Now the option papers, there are 4. There are variants available for the ATX. There's also variants available for the audit paper as well. And I would say, have you actually thought when you get to that level, which ones would you want to do? Did you know that there is an analytical tool on the ACCA website and you can put in my dream job? So if I show you my dream job here, you can choose where you fancy working. Do you fancy working in practice, in industry? Do you want to work as a corporate risk and governance person? So I love audit committees. I love looking to check we've got the right number of directors, checking that we've got a relationship with the stakeholders, the directors are doing as required. We've got some non-exec directors. I'd love to be one of those when I retire. So for me, my dream job will be to work in governance, risk and control. So if you plug this into the ACCA website, they will tell you that you should be doing a bit of audit because that's got a lot of your regulations and risk management in there. And then I probably want to be doing something like APM because it's got strategy. And obviously as someone who's a director or on committees, you do a lot of strategy on there. And so you can do a little bit of a search to see what your job would be. Now I've just moved over the types of papers and feeder papers. AFM, you'd want to look to see how did I perform in FM? PM, how did I perform in APM based on PM? So think about your feeder paper, how long ago it was you did your feeder paper. Were you exempt from your feeder paper? In which case, do you think you actually know the content well enough? And then some of your employers might have some views as to which papers they'd like you to do. But I'd just say, have a more informed thought about what papers are best for me, for my current job, for my aspirations. And you've got such an opportunity here, which is why ACCA is so good to focus and be more employable. Not many of the qualifications allow for this specialization. A lot of them go, these are the papers. ACCA go, these are the papers, and you have choice. And the choice comes at the top. So it's there once you've had a feel for all of them and the breadth and the basics, you've then got your choice at the top. So I've put some progression rules there, thinking about combinations of papers, thinking about the ethics module and how that fits in, and then thinking also about the 4 sittings a year, how you utilize those. And so it is a very, very good qualification because you've got so many career options that you could have available to you. We've got, again, on the ACCA website, how these papers feed in. So whether SBL was going to be a good paper for you is based on probably how you did in PM. And if you were to do APM, that overlaps as well. You've got baby tax joins into big tax. There's no surprise there. But just looking at the feeder papers and your performance, as well as obviously how you would want to be going through to your future career. So hopefully that was useful. And if there are any questions, I'll hand back to Nikki.
Oh, Claire, I love it. I'm just trying to make a list of the things that I like, and now I have to cut it down. So I loved it when you said spreadsheets and color on a spreadsheet. I can do that all day. And where do we put my camera on? So I really like that, and I think probably everybody on in this session can relate. Sometimes I'm in the depth of my spreadsheet and adding my color and my VLOOKUPs and if statements, and the phone rings, and I think, really, people, do I need to deal with people now? I just want to do my spreadsheets and my colors. And also just hearing you chat reminds us why we love ACCA, and it inspires us to keep going. I like the stats and the simplicity of being 20% more likely to pass with PPP, and if you follow the formula, you're 35% more likely, and it's based on years of stats and
spreadsheets, years of spreadsheets,
and spreadsheets with color on them. I also like seeing that the top brands employ ACCA members. And for us here in the bottom of Africa and Southern Africa, we need that. We need to lift ourselves out of where we are and lift our head as such and just see the bigger picture sometimes. So that helped a lot. And then what I really learned today, and I will take forward in my own consulting with students, is I like your practical approach to selecting your electives. We usually consult students on it, but I like the added bit. We usually consult students on it in a similar way to how you approach it, but I like the added bit of looking at your dream job on the one side and how you performed in your feeder papers on the other side. And somewhere in there lies the truth. Somewhere in there lies the answer. It's a little bit like looking at the future and looking at the past to inform your decision. So I thought that was brilliant. So obvious, but brilliant.
It's just making it as painless as possible. So, I mean, it's a hard enough qualification. It is hard, and I'm pleased it's hard because that means not everybody can do it. So we don't want everyone being ACCA qualified. So it's a barrier, and it is hard. And if you can make it smoother and better for yourself, so it's not as much of a journey, then anything that can help is good.
Excellent. I have a question here from Habakkuk, who says, but one thing I'm curious about, which I'm not sure about, is whether your completion certificate comes with the optional modules you choose, or does it just say you are now ACCA qualified? The reason I'm asking this is whether you will not be disadvantaged, for instance, if let's say you decide to go to work for AGSA, Auditor General, and tell them you have ACCA, but you didn't have an audit as your module when you were doing ACCA, while the Auditor General still will they still consider you as an ACCA, even if you didn't do audit in one of your optional modules, or wouldn't it matter as long as you are ACCA qualified? That's very critical to know for me.
So very, very good question. When I was a student, I was very, very diligent, as you can imagine, and I studied everything, and I had paper tabs in everything and did lots of question practice, mock exam questions. Everything I was told to do, I diligently followed it because I was a traditional accountant and I like to follow procedures. And I chose to do audit and tax because I worked in practice. And I worked so hard for my exams, and I was convinced that when I did finally qualify, so I'd done my exams, I'd done my ethics module, I'd also registered that I'd got 3 years of experience, I was convinced that people would go, and what mark did you get in your FR exam? And nobody has ever asked me. So disappointing. And equally, nobody has ever asked me what options I did. So they're just keen to know that you are ACCA qualified because that means you've met the standard. They're keen to know that you are fully ACCA qualified, not that you have just done the exams and you've not got the 3 years experience. So I think they're more keen to know that you've passed your exams. No one ever asked me if I passed them first time, and I did. I was really wanted to put that on my CV, and nobody wanted to know that I'd passed them first time. The only thing I've ever failed is my driving test, and nobody's ever asked me that either, but I think they're more likely to ask about the driving test than they are my ACCA qualifications. So an employer wouldn't necessarily ask you. I would expect an employer to not even know that there are option papers, and the employer is maybe so far since they did their exams, they maybe didn't have the option papers. So I know I'd go and talk to a lot of training managers at the big firms, and I have to explain the qualification to them, and they just go, oh, it wasn't like that for me, and oh, we had to do this. They don't know what the papers are. So I would be very, very surprised if they even asked you, and I would be very, very surprised if it made any difference because you've met that standard that's required.
Excellent, thank you very much. Kada, do you have an opinion on this?
Yes, I do. The Auditor General, yesterday I was in a webinar with the University of Johannesburg, and it was with the Auditor General. One of the things they were explaining is that we think when they say Auditor General, they only employ auditors. When they were doing COVID the COVID audits that they did. They needed doctors. They needed people who understood supply chain systems. They needed people who understood internal control, so people who are good at risk management. They needed people who understood public policy, so they could interpret how laws were being applied. So one of the things they were very clear in that is that they don't just employ people who are auditors. They do performance audits. They do special audits that require multidisciplinary teams. So I don't think they would ask you for that, because they look for different skills. Audit teams at the AG are multidisciplinary. So they come from different skills depending on the audit that they are doing. So that's one thing that caught my eye, to say that they don't focus on that you did auditing. You can take any route to doing. They do a lot of things under the banner of the Auditor General. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Kada. You had me at, I was in a webinar with the Auditor General earlier today. I thought, oh, wow. So that sounds good, and good to hear that you are active there. Then I have another question. Somebody asked if the webinar will be available to watch offline. Yes, Pam will send the link to everybody. I'm not sure if you signed up with your email address or if you just followed the link, but either way, Pam will know. Pam is in charge of distributing. She's a communications director and will be in charge of making sure everybody gets everything. And in case you are unsure, send your email address to Pam. Old school is what I would have done. Then I have a question from somebody about exemptions. Does ACCA grant exemptions of other professional bodies?
Yes, I know that. Yes, they do. So we've got quite a few students that move across from different qualifications, and it tends to be because they've changed employers and their employers have a preference to a different qualification. It might be because the student and the learner wants to change, but in my experience, it tends to be that they work for a different employer who has a different preference. And ACCA do grant exemptions for prior learning from other qualifications. It depends how far up your qualification you've got, and you can contact ACCA and find out. It's the same as if you've got degrees. You can search by your institution to see if they've registered for exemptions. So there are agreements between qualifications. There might be requirements that you've completed a certain level of the other qualification rather than just the odd paper, though. But it's worth checking out. I do know they do give some exemptions.
Okay. Habakkuk, I see your hand. I'm just going to answer Tapiwa. Kada, I hope you are ready. I knew this question was coming and we didn't chat about it beforehand, but do you know if there's any significant progress in discussions with IRBA in South Africa to get accreditation for ACCA members to conduct audits?
Yes, we have applied for the IRBA license. We applied last year, so we're going through the accreditation process right now. We don't know when the results will be out because IRBA doesn't have a board currently. I think it was all in the news, but we have done the application and they are processing the application.
On that day when we are granted by IRBA the accreditation, Kada, what are you going to do? Rain dance, bottle of champagne, singing, and I think we will hear I don't know if it's a sigh of relief or jubilation. Yes. I don't know what the right word is, of all ACCA students and members in Africa and Southern Africa. It will be a big day. We will definitely all have to meet online and just celebrate, because it will be a massive breakthrough.
Yeah,
Kada,
that's right.
Something you must call me and we will virtually, as in open a bottle of champagne, but my bottle won't be virtual, my bottle will be real.
Okay. Thanks.
Habakkuk, you have a question? I saw your hand up.
Yes. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you for the opportunity. Okay, maybe initially just, I feel like the last question, maybe if they can just choose the last part, because the last part I asked whether like the certificate includes like the modules that you have done, or it just says Acca. So yeah, that's the first question. But the second one would be like, it's more to the Acca South Africa. Yes, and I was so glad to hear the last part where they were saying they have applied to IBA so that the Acca members can also maybe open their own practice. That's very good news. Yeah, but I also want to know again, what is like Acca South Africa doing actively to make sure that, because it seems like the Acca members, more especially in South Africa, I have no doubt that internationally it carries a lot of weight, but it seems like there's some sort of discrimination in the job market against the Acca members, because in most positions you'll see that they say like they say CASA, like it's as if some of them they don't even recognize like Acca. Well, I am in the audit industry. One thing I know is that the AGSA does like fully recognize ACCA, because like even their charge out rate is exactly the same as the CASA. But what I've noticed is that more in the private sector, I mean, even in the audit firms, because I've seen there's a screen that was shared with regard to the audit firms that like recognize Acca, but in South Africa specifically, when they advertise their posts like for audit managers and stuff, you hardly ever see where they say like Acca member. It's usually like CASA. So yeah, basically what I would like to know is, what is ACCA South Africa doing actively to make sure that their students or members are not discriminated against in the job market, basically, because I mean it's quite clear that there is that issue.
Nikki.
Yes.
Can I do something unconventional? There's Dumisani. I think Dumisani explains this very well.
I love Dumisani.
Yeah. Yes, I think bring in Dumisani. He answers it very well, because I think he's an advocate for audit, and yeah, he answers this very well. Yeah.
Before, Dumisani, can you give me 1 second? I just want to say goodbye to Pam. It is her birthday. She was on technical support today and she needs to leave. Her birthday celebration started at 7 o'clock. So Pam, please leave.
Thank you very much.
Now. Happy birthday from all of us, and I will see you tomorrow.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much, Cara. Thank you very much, Nikki. I thought I should just show my video so that everybody can see what I look like. Can that person repeat that question? I just missed it.
Okay, so basically what I was saying is there seem to be some sort of discrimination against like the Acca qualified people, because in my understanding they should be in the same sitting as the CASA. And one place or one employer where I've seen that they actually do recognize it fully, like on the same footing as the CASA, is the Auditor General, because I've even seen even their charge out rate, like for CA, is the same as ACCA. But with regard to the private sector, they in South Africa specifically, they don't seem to recognize ACCA like as being equivalent to like CASA, because even the posts, if you try to check for a job or something, they would usually just say CASA. You'll hardly ever find where they say Acca, like in the private sector. Even the companies that they've shown during the presentation now, like your Deloitte, and when they say maybe, for instance, they want an audit manager in South Africa, they would just say CASA. You will hardly ever see where they say Acca. So basically what I'm trying to know is, what is Acca South Africa doing actively to make sure that they're trying to close that gap, to make sure that their members and students are not discriminated against? Yes, internationally, I have no doubt that Acca carries weight, but then what happens to the guys who are in South Africa? Does it mean now if they want greener pasture, they have to go out of South Africa, or is something that is being done by Acca? And I've heard something that was said by Mr. Piri, which is good news, that this is actually in the audit side that you're trying to get some sort of fees with IBA so that they can practice. But what about the other side? What's actually being done?
Okay. I don't work for ACCA, but then please do follow me on LinkedIn, and then you'll see that I do write about all these sort of things that affect the accounting and the auditing profession in the country. And then when I talk about this thing, I tend to be very passionate. But then in answering your question, I hope that I will do justice to your question. So what happens is, it is indeed true that at AGSA, ACCA is being placed on an equal footing. A case in point, in the past, the post of the Deputy Auditor General used to only require a CASA qualification. But then after Tsakani Maluleke, the current AG, was appointed, AGSA did go through the recruitment process whereby it also included CASA, and then it said CASA or ACCA. So it means that at AG, indeed, they have elevated ACCA as a qualification and as an equivalent to CASA. Okay, but then when it comes to private sector, so you'd see that ACCA all the time, it says people must be advocates. So what happens is that SAICA does not tell its members to be advocate, but then that is a implied responsibility that CASA members hold. So what happens is that because ACCA has enjoyed so much privilege in these countries that most of their members are CASAs. So when a member is of a particular professional body, they tend to be biased towards the qualification that they hold. So if you go to MTN, the CFO of MTN, the current CFO, not the previous one who is now a CEO, the current CFO is a CASA. So if they are looking for, let's say, senior managers or managers within her department, she is more likely to be biased towards CASAs, and she is more likely to tell HR that the people that I am looking for is CASA, even though you can come and then have a better experience and better qualifications, sometimes, because sometimes ACCA members come with better qualifications. So they would still hire a CASA, and they would rather hire an incompetent CASA than a competent ACCA. It's a matter of advocating for the qualification that they have. And then in most cases, you know of ACCA, you probably know of CIMA as well. But then in most cases, what I have found is that SAICA members tend to wear blinkers, so they don't know anything else other than CASA. So the matter of a private sector calling for only CASA is because the hiring manager is a CASA himself. So it shouldn't actually bother you at all. So if you are an ACCA member, what you must do is that you must try to, when you do your career pathing, you must try to acquire relevant experience that will put you in an equal footing. I've been in interviews whereby I'm not an ACCA member yet. I'm only left with a module to qualify. But then I have found myself being interviewed with people who hold CASA qualification. Because when I saw CASA only, I also applied. But then because at the end of the day, for an objective HR manager, for an objective hiring manager, what they are actually looking for, they are looking for somebody who is well experienced in that field. And remember that companies don't want to train people anymore. So they want a completed package. Even though I don't have ACCA, even though I am applying with a qualification that they did not call for, I apply anyway. But then when Kada was responding on the audit rights, and I just want to tell you why I also advocate for the audit right in South Africa. The audit right gives advantage and it gives relevance and prestige on the qualification. You will see that the moment we start getting audit right, and then the moment that when we do get audit right, big four firms and auditing firms won't have a choice but then call for ACCA. And then if you are an ACCA student, an ACCA trainee, or an ACCA manager, when you interact with different people, they would say, but then we like how these ACCA people think, you see. And what is encouraging though is that since 2017, ACCA has been increasingly being called as a qualification of choice in South Africa. Nedbank is now calling for ACCA members. MTN is calling for ACCA members. In fact, MTN, I don't know, I think they are in 20 countries they've got presence in 20 countries. And then in Africa, most of their CFOs are ACCA members. And then in two months ago, I saw a post whereby the Zambian office of MTN was looking for a CFO, and then they only stated ACCA there. But then those changes are happening, but then albeit at a slow pace.
Excellent.
And don't worry.
Dumisani ends with "Don't worry." Thank you, Dumisani. I always enjoy seeing your passion, and it is always good. I love it when you jump in and when you advocate for ACCA. And it is very true that you say that if you that people with a certain qualification would advocate for others with the same qualification, and it is then something that will change over time. What I do know is that ACCA works really hard in South Africa to keep pushing for that recognition. And I know that is a key piece of the puzzle that will fast track the acceptance we are already seeing. So as you are saying, then somebody at the head of MTN is an ACCA, and somebody at the head of Nedbank, and somebody at the head of another organization, and so it will grow. But the real catalyst that we are looking for is the recognition. And but other than that, it keeps growing, and we need to keep advocating for ourselves. I have to call it a night. It is 7 minutes past 7 where I am. I don't know what your time. It could be morning, it could be evening. Thank you very much. Are there any final parting comments, maybe from Claire or from Cardo?
I'd just like to say, make sure you keep progressing. It's worth it. It's a very flexible qualification. It is very recognised. I know sounds like there's issues locally for you, but it is very, very recognised globally, and it's a growing qualification that's reacting to the marketplace and employability. So stick with it. Stick to your programme of how many papers you're going to do and when you plan to do them, but stick with it. It's worth it.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.